Hello everyone! Our lesson plan focuses on collocations with make and do. Our target learners are upper primary students. The corpus that we used for this lesson plan is EdUHK. And the reason that we decided to teach the different usage between make and do is that many Chinese students are confused with the differences in the definitions of these two words, simply because they would be translated into the same character in Chinese. We created our lesson plan based on the 4 principles that Dr. Ma has given to all of us during the corpus workshop. The steps of the 4 principles are as follows. The first step is to test students' knowledge and detect lexical errors. The second principle is to provide students with hands-on corpus searches and help them look for language patterns. The third step is to encourage inductive discovery by students and ask them to summarize language patterns. And finally, the teacher will provide output exercises for students. Let's first discuss testing students' knowledge. So, in the beginning of the lesson, we will divide the class into groups of 4 and ask the students to match the words with pictures and put the words in the right boxes. The matching part of the picture here is a bit too busy. So instead of having so many words and pictures, you may reduce it to 12 of them. You don't have to use the exact words in this picture. In a real classroom, the teacher may use this opportunity to test students' knowledge on the vocabulary they learned in previous lessons. Then, of course, ask them to put the words in the correct columns. The reason that we use this picture with colors and not using the traditional way, for example, mix and match words, is just because we want the students to have a bit more fun doing this activity, and we want to engage them better. The purpose of this activity is for the teacher to detect lexical errors. Therefore, the teacher's reminder here is that once the teacher identifies a knowledge gap from this activity, he or she may write the students' wrong collocations on the board so that everyone can see them and tell the students that these are some of the mistakes you guys made. We'll come back to them later. Now, the teacher may help the students summarize language patterns. He or she may provide 2 tables as handouts to students. Table 1 for words that collocate with make, Table 2 for words that collocate with do. Then ask the students to summarize the words and find the differences of definitions between make and do. As you can see, there are 10 words on each table, and we've chosen easier words for students to work with. If the teachers still find that students are having trouble summarizing the language patterns, he or she may provide some scaffolding with the class. For example, if you make something, is there a result? Yes, for example. If you do something, is there a result? Maybe not. What are the examples? What's another word for make? Etc. We don't expect students to summarize the language patterns themselves. The purpose of this exercise is to train students to be more responsible for their own learning. The teacher may then summarize language patterns with students and explain the different usage of make and do with more examples. We won't talk about the details here, but now that the students understand the different usage between make and do, the teacher may go back to the board and correct the students' wrong collocations with the whole class and explain why they're wrong. Once the students understand the different usage between make and do, the teacher may demonstrate to students how to do a search with the corpus tool. Then ask the students to do a search themselves. But because they are upper primary students and they may have trouble making sense of some collocations, just ask them to do a search and click on the words that are the same as the ones on Table 1 and Table 2, and ask them to discuss the sentences with their partners. What we're trying to do here is to put the words make and do and their collocations in context. After they're done, the teacher may give examples of make and do sentences with the whole class. The output activity is to have the students work in pairs. Then we may ask them to summarize the story doing time orally in 2 or 3 sentences and discuss make and do collocations. Here is the story doing time. It has a lot of make and do collocations in it, as you can see. All the collocations here are in italic. Some are easier and others are more difficult. And the students don't have to discuss all of them. The teacher may use another color and bold the collocations that he or she wants the students to talk about. Here's the teacher's reminder. Ask the students to pay attention to tenses of make and do. When the students are having a discussion among themselves, the teacher may walk around the classroom to check for understanding and to help struggling students. The teacher then may summarize the story with the students and talk about the collocations with them. Here is a summary of the story entitled Doing Time. It is about the author making mistakes in public. She talked about 2 mistakes she made. The first mistake was like this. When she came out of the building, she didn't remember where to go, whether to turn left or to turn right. The second mistake goes like this. She drove her car to buy a desk. When she finished shopping, she mistakenly thought that someone else's car was hers. Now, the story is a bit too long, but the teacher doesn't have to show the whole story to the class. There are actually 2 examples in the passage, so the teacher can just show one incident, for example, which is just the first 2 paragraphs, and highlight 5 collocations with make and do for the students to discuss in class. For homework, students work in pairs to write a 100-word story about a funny mistake that you or your classmates made in public. Use at least 5 expressions of make and do in your story. The purpose of the pair work output activity and homework is to get the students to use the collocations of make and do in context. Previously, when the teacher asks them to do hands-on corpus search, we got them to look at the collocations of make and do in sentences. Now, we're getting them to look at the collocations in a passage. And then, we ask them to write expressions of make and do themselves, using a funny story. Essentially, we're trying to develop a learning curve for the students so that they can build up their skills bit by bit. Thank you for watching.